Welcome to this episode of the Level Design Podcast. In this episode, we illuminate the dark arts of the photons with the help of the Chinese Room's senior lighting artist, Ellen Shelley. Let's get on with the show. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Level Design Podcast. I am Mark Drew, and I shall be lighting the way forward so we can delve into the dark arts of lighting in games with the wonderful Ellen Shelley, who is senior lighting artist at the Chinese Room. And this is a bit insidious because we have another member of the Chinese Room with us, which is, you might remember from some previous episodes, is Rob McLachlan. So yes, it's a bit nepotism, but well, you know. Welcome to the show, Ellen.
Hi, glad to be here. And if you leave the door open, there's some more Chinese Room people coming in.
Yeah. we just bundle them all into various episodes. It's like when we run out of people in the game industry, we're like, yeah, whatever, we just bring people in.
Don't worry, we've got like 8 more Chinese Room that are like kind of coming for the next one.
Excellent. So we're not going to run out of episodes. Yeah, definitely backups. So it's going to be good to have a backup. But more importantly, you're on the show. So thank you for joining us. Also joining us is the wonderful Valentina Crisostomo and Jonathan Wilson, who is a free man, a freelancer. Right, because I wanted to say that you've actually worked in the same company as Alan, right?
Yeah.
He's
actually working at Chinese Room.
What?
No,
I'm a spy. I'm undercover.
He's a spy.
I mean, nowadays, you know, you wouldn't notice people working. Could be people working. I mean, everyone's working remotely, so you never know.
You work anywhere now, right? That's how it works. You literally work anywhere.
I mean, I think anywhere is meant to be location, not so much company, as in like, yeah, you can work wherever. I'm like rock star now, whatever, you know. I'm not, by the way.
I can work anywhere as long as it's not a gig, a cinema, a restaurant,
right? A bar, yeah. But I mean, you know, this will soon pass, and this episode will be out, and there won't be the hungry dead roaming the streets, you know, looking for, you know, bloodthirsty zombies, I hope, because nothing surprises me anymore. But back to the topic at hand. One of the things that has always eluded me, and I'm so glad that you've come to join us, is to start talking about it's actually a misunderstood art, I think. It's something that people really don't take into consideration, that is a thing that makes everything look wonderful, and does light. Because if you didn't have any light, I mean, we're talking virtual light and actual light, is you wouldn't see anything in the game, well, unless it's
self-illuminating.
Yeah, no, let's not get into material shaders just now.
I think tech artists would be really happy about it. Like no lights, complete darkness. The frame rate is amazing.
Can't see anything, but my God. But
the game's function. You can't see anything
else. No, but this is one of the bits of the kind of game pipeline that has always intrigued me, because it literally puts the magic into the scenes. You know, you got like these blockouts, and then you can have environment artists, and I'm not going to diss environment artists, but you can have like just a simple blockout, but then you get like an lighting artist to light it well, and boom, job done. Everyone can go home. It's perfect, you know. And this is something that has always eluded me. So I've decided to pickle your brains and do it in public on the podcast so that everybody else can get that. But before we start, a bit of your background would be great, just so people know like how you've gotten into, like, are lighting artists born or are they made? That's the
how I got into the bright arts.
The bright arts.
The bright.
Well, they all started in architects, so you all need to learn how to make buildings.
Okay.
And no, so
there's 7 years.
Yeah, for 7. So you need to do 7 years of learning about wall installation and window sizes, and then you will get to be a lighting artist. No, when I was younger, I did start an architect's practice in Brighton. It was great. It was a small little architect's practice, overlooked like the whole sea and everything. Nice. Wonderful. But I never looked at it because the curtains were always down. And it was around the time when like Oculus kind of was a thing, like, the old DK2, really terrible frame rate. I'm gonna throw up.
It just judded.
I have to say now it's a lot better. So it started with that. So they wanted me to basically turn some of their sort of CAD drawings into full UE4 levels. And at the time I was young and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And then the next day, they bought like an Oculus and it was arrived on my desk. And it was at the time when like nobody was really using Unreal Engine to use like Oculus with or VR, which sounds ridiculous now because it's massive in Unreal Engine. But at the time it was mainly the people in Brighton, because it was a big Unity base and still is. They all were using Unity. So I went along to a VR sort of meetup being like, hey, I've got a headset, like anyone here using Unreal? And it's like almost like a tumbleweed blew through the place. Then I went to the great forums known as the Unreal Engine Answer Hub, and basically ended up asking loads of questions and then answering them myself because nobody really knew what was going on at this time. So I became one of like the best. I think it was like the top answer people.
Wow.
No, because I was answering my own questions 3 days later.
Oh, I see, right. Yeah, but that's kind of cheating. It's like, I don't know how to do this thing. I do. Wait a minute.
It's me.
It's one of the least well-named support channels in the industry.
Yeah.
The Unreal Answer Hub is just the Unreal Question Hub, really. It's just a load of questions of people from 5 years ago having exactly the problem you are, often with a reply from themselves saying, "Never mind, I fixed it."
You don't
as to what they
and
did.
no solution at the end, like
unless you go back and re-answer yourself, like me again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you've reached like a higher level of like game developer when you go back, like you ask something on Google and it's like brings up your own question from years ago.
Wow.
And the problem is like you're going like, I'm still asking that question, and that's
still hasn't changed in all these years. After the Answer Hub, basically, and the fact I had it was actually from Develop Conference. I met yourself, Mark, at Develop Conference, and a few other devs. They actually really helped this great, what am I doing? I need to make a level in Unreal Engine and Oculus Rift quest. I did do it. I did manage to make an Unreal level on the go. So it felt like a train moving and, putting the tracks down at the same time. So I learned Unreal. I learned all about Oculus. I learned how finicky it was, the fact that I had a deadline and I was panicking because I could not get the thing to turn on. And I'd asked like all the questions, I'd SOS'd everybody. And it literally came down to somebody being like, wiggle the wire. And I thought they were joking. I was like, what do you mean wiggle the wire? They were like, yeah, just wiggle it. It's really not made like great. It's very like, it's still in production. So I wiggled it and then it just turned the camera on. And it was one of those things where I just sort of stared out of the window for a while, just questioning my life. So after that, got it, did work, did manage to get a level.
Can I just ask, how far was the headset flung across the room when that happened?
Well, the architects isn't there anymore now. It exploded in a ball of fire.
I can imagine like the frustration. And to be honest with you, I think I've got an Oculus set here, and it's the most moody bit of kit I've ever had, and I haven't even been developing for it. I just want to play a game, and usually if I want to play a game, I have to add 45 minutes of faffing and restarting before I start actually playing. It's not like, hey, just put the headset on and play. It's like, nobody.
No, so you have to completely log out of life.
That's what the ads don't show you. The ads just show you the people already wearing the headset and playing. They don't show you like the hour before they spend.
They also show you these houses that are like the size of football fields.
Right.
This has not been made for a British flat.
It's like you need 6 feet. It's like, I don't have 6 feet.
What is this? What is this luxury? 6 feet? No, it's great. Managed to make a level. Finally got it all to work. That was cool. And yeah, so from that, I was there for a good couple of years, and it allowed me to learn Unreal. And then everything I was learning from that, I was able to like put towards games. So it was the same kind of pipeline. It was the same kind of tech. And also the fact that I loved fantasy. I still do love sort of fantasy work. So in my spare time and things and lunch, I was always doing like a fantasy portfolio almost of Unreal Engine levels. And a couple of them got picked up by Epic themselves. So I joined Twitter. That was cool. And then I honestly thought like within the next couple of weeks that I'd been like my art had been stolen, because I was getting loads of notifications and I couldn't quite understand what was going on. And I kept seeing like this piece I was working on like kept popping up. And at the time I was just not part of anything. I wasn't part of like any sort of game community. I didn't know anyone on Twitter. And so I sort of panicked, like what's going on with my art? Has it been stolen by a t-shirt company? This kind of thing.
Yeah.
But no, it was Epic themselves. They'd like used it as a promotional thing, and they were really sweet. Actually, they sent me loads of like goodie, and they did actually send me a t-shirt, not with my own art on it.
That'd be kind of ironic. They'll be like, thanks,
we used your art on a t-shirt. Yeah. And from that, I met a load of people because they invited me to some events and things, and then it just sort of grew from there, where I just met like more people and got some more help. Because at the time, I still wasn't quite like even though I was working as a VR developer and architect, I wasn't like what I've felt in games, like in a games company. And that was my kind of goal when I was younger, to be in a company.
But was it to do like lighting, or was it to build levels?
It was to be an environment artist. So a lot of lighters start as environment artists because people feel that to be a lighting artist, you just need to know how to light. But I'd say most of my job is fixing stuff that's broken, which Rob could confirm is what happens a lot of the time. So a lot of my time is spent 10% lighting, and the other time is like turning off my camera, or like on Xbox where you get really angry and you unplug a mic because fixing stuff basically. But yeah, so I'm still trying to sort of get into games, and there was a point where I tried I think a lot of students can say this on people trying to get into the industry. It takes a while. I will say some people be like, it's not luck. Some of it is luck. Like some of it is the right time, the right people, the right kind of work as well that goes towards what. Sometimes they might like your work, but it's not the fact that they don't like your work. It's the fact that it doesn't quite match up to the projects that they're working on a lot of the time. So it's also this that plays into account.
And you can't take that personally, right? It's like we've talked to loads. I mean, Valentina and I have gone through this whole process of trying to get artists and trying to get concept artists. And it's like, we love your work. We think would work great. But the project is not looking for this.
No.
Sorry.
That's a good thing. You have to tell them though. Most of the times you get ghosted and you don't know what's gone wrong. Is your work not good enough, or what's happening? And it's just good to tell people. I think that's
some of
missing out, right?
It's quite funny because one of them I actually got rejected from Sumo, and I work for Sumo now. And a lot of students have these kind of like stories where they get rejected from the companies that they end up going to work for in the end. But it's not because you're not great or anything. It's because you're just not. Maybe you need a bit longer. Maybe again the project wasn't quite right. But yeah, I find it interesting how that happens sometimes to a lot of devs. So yeah, spent a while trying to get into the industry, and then I almost took a break. I almost became like a snowboard instructor. Like there was like this crossroads in my life where I was either going to become a snowboard instructor or sit in front of a computer being grumpy. But I would have probably done that anyway, even on a mountain in my spare time.
I could just imagine sitting there like sliding, arms crossed, looking really grumpy, like in the snow.
Like on a board.
Yeah, just like
with a laptop.
I was just thinking you have a computer on that board too.
I mean, same thing. It's identical, but.
So I'd actually like filled out a form like to go off to, I think it was like Whistler, Canada at the time, and I'd filled it in, and I actually thought, I'll give it one more day. I'll leave it and I'll send it off in the morning. And at this time, I'd had a load of just job applications out there floating about, and I was with a couple of recruiters. And then literally the next morning, I got a phone call from a recruiter being like, "Oh, we've got you a job." And I thought, "Oh, is it going to be, like not quite games?" I also was young and I didn't have a lot of confidence. You just think this kind of stuff. And he turned around and was like, "No, it's with Sony." And I didn't know what to do. Like I kept just smiling. I was just so excited. So that was great. So my first kind of industry job was at Sony London. Probably the most tired I've ever been in my whole life, because I was commuting from Brighton to London on a contract, on like a Sony contract, which was fine, and it definitely wasn't something I was going to be able to do like forever. So I just sort of used it as a I did the contract, the game came out kind of thing, and it was Blood and Truth. This one, so this was like a big
VR one.
Yeah, so this was their big VR title. And again, it was like I was talking about before, with the whole your portfolio lining up with what projects that certain companies were doing at the time. My VR development from the architects linked up with the project they were doing at Sony.
What was your role there?
My first one was like an outsource artist / environment artist. So it was just great actually, because I got to see which at the time, so I'd say it was it's still weirdly not widely known that a lot of companies use outsource, and it's becoming more known, and there was actually occasions where they're not even included in the credits for certain games. So it was cool to see where the industry was going in a sense in terms of this, but then they were being used more widely across industry. So I got to see the behind the scenes in terms of like outsource, like how all the assets come in. And it was my job to kind of like go through all these assets, check them all, and I was almost learning this other part of game dev as well. Like obviously when you become an environment artist, you need to know the technical sides of everything, but when you're checking other people's work, you become like very aware of like the poly count and what texture size they use, and like even weird stuff like, say we had a sand level, like this asset's come in and it's wet, like it doesn't work for a sand level. Like, you had to give this strange feedback being like, "Sorry mate, that's not the right color sand, like you're gonna have to send it back, like it's not."
That's when you get really rich. Wrong type of sand, my friend.
Oh no, wrong type of sand. Like the wrong type of sand, I'm afraid. Like but it's cool. So I got to sort of see that side, and then I was friends with the environment artists as well, so they were I got to make work on an environment they were doing, and got to also work on a couple of assets they were doing. But my main thing I really loved was I loved the fact that the levels would come in, and then they only had one lighter at Sony, and he would like overnight or something, like we'd come back and it would just be these gorgeous levels. It's like the lighting artist had been here, like just sort of swooped in, just like dust. It just looks, I just loved it. I just loved how the game just looked so complete. Like everything came together as one, and everyone would get really excited when they like the very tired lighting artist would be like, "I've done it."
He's done his job.
He's done his job. So I basically went over to him and got taught. That's how it sort of started, the kind of wanting to know more basically about how the process. I just didn't really know, other than filling in some lights in Unreal. I didn't understand the process and a big pipeline. How it works. And the fact that like there's different ways as well in engines, but the overall sort of how you do it and how you start doing it as well. So that was the kind of the gateway into me wanting to do that. Like I loved environments, but that it just sparked something. I wanted to do that. So after that so the game shipped. That was cool. And then I decided, it's going to be lighting that I want to do. Basically, I want to specialize in lighting. And so I went to go join Supermassive Games in Guildford, where I did Man of Medan. So again, it was very heavy lighting. I was a lighting artist.
That's a how can I put this? That's a very specific lighting environment, right? Like you're talking about like fantasy, that's one thing, but like Man of Medan, for people who don't know, it's
horror.
It's horror. It's also it's not live action, but it's kind of like really realistic lighting. It's not stylized. Well, it is very stylized because of
cinematic lighting.
Cinematic, thank you. It's very cinematic. Thank you. So that's a challenge, right?
So I had like two loves. So one of them weirdly was horror, and the other one was fantasy. So I like this kind of strange mix between like really bright fantasy like Fable, and then like really dark like horror. And it was a really good place to get a grounding for lighting. Like I've still got friends to this day from that company, like lighters, and they'd all come from different backgrounds. Like I remember like speaking to two other lighters being like, oh yeah, what have you worked on? And they'd be like Lord of the Rings. And I just like, my brain would just be like, what? It's crazy. And one of them had done, so the Dark Crystal had come out around the time.
Oh, wow,
and I was like, wow, this looks awesome. And he's like, yeah, I worked on that. And I was like, this is great. Like I love this kind of stuff. And I learned a lot from these guys. But stuff that you use. So even though Sony was teaching game related lighting, in terms of engine things and the things you need to know to do with engine, the Supermassive and the lighters, they were teaching us sort of the principles of lighting. With you use like the three like spotlights in terms of on characters. You use like the fill light, the key light, the rim light, that kind of stuff. This kind of thing that I didn't know about, not coming from a film background. And as games are progressing, they are becoming more and more realistic. So the need to use this kind of same structure was coming in basically. And even now they still light characters similar to film, and a lot of our references were film based. Like we will look at film lighting. That was cool. And then we did a lot of sort of sequencer work. So I was doing as well like cutscene lighting. So that again, that differs from just normal in-game lighting, because you can have a lot more lights. Like you can go a bit nuts if you want to, as long as you hit like the benchmark of what the concept is. You can go nuts. Again, it's easier not to, because you say you get feedback from a director, you don't want to be like, great, which one out of these 400 lights I've placed in here is the one that's wrong? Like, you still want to try and get there in a manageable way, so you're not.
And the director's feedback, I'm guessing, for lighting is not very very specific. Oh, there's this 399 light, please remove it. Is more like, hey, I think there's too much light in his face or something like that, I'm imagining. So how do you translate the vague feedback into, oh, I know what I'm going to do technically?
Again, through the having that kind of structure in, so like having the main one be the key light, having a main one be fill, so that you then are able to relay that feedback, like, oh, that light on the side's too bright. You're like, oh, it's the key light, just turn that down. Or the volumetrics are too high, it's a big spot that goes behind the character that's got volumetric, and that becomes a lot easier to adjust, rather than oh, hang on, it is 398, I reckon, this one.
Yeah.
Speaking of my favorite Jira of all time was one of the blue lights is too blue, and that was all it was, like in our game. And to this day, I don't know which one it is.
Well, the one that's too blue.
The one that's too blue, obviously. Yeah.
Obviously. So I was just going to ask about what if the feedback is has to do with more emotional impact or the mood, and it's just like, hey, we want to make this scene more scary or stuff like that. So how do you adjust the lighting to fit that kind of even more vague direction? It
was a really quite a difficult balance actually in horror, because some people, my friends were like, when I said I was working like a horror game, they were like, oh, it's easy, right? You don't have any lights. I'm like, yeah, it's really easy.
Just switch off all the lights,
just take them all off, and then you've done the horror game. It's a balance between, obviously, like level design again, like you need to be able to see where the player's going, and you also need to create this mood where it is still scary. You don't just look a big thing at the end being like, this is where you go, kind of thing. And if you especially want the player to be like lost or not feeling, like they know exactly where to go at a certain point, it's a balance. But we would do things where we would use volumetrics, so to kind of just pick out silhouettes of things. We wouldn't always use like full spotlights on a wall, like picking out the whole wall. And it would just be.
As a pedant, not a pedant, as someone that's completely does not understand any of these
Ignoramus.
That's the word. Thank you. I was going to keep it family friendly, but as an utter idiot in this subject, what do you define as a volumetric light versus, let's say, like a spotlight or a film light or something like that?
The best way I can
This is not a
explain
test, by the way. This is just like me trying to do it.
So I'm taking notes.
Hang on, let me just Google it.
That's the game developer spirit.
No, we've done it.
How everyone does it.
The best way I can kind of explain it is like, say you've got fog. It would be fog. It's like a cone of fog, basically, that you obviously don't have like a really intense fog like cone. So that's all you see on the screen, but you soften it out so that it almost sort of pushes the character silhouette out from the screen, or pushes a certain element in the world out from the background. That's kind of what a volumetric is. And a spot, again, it's a spotlight, so it's a bright direct light.
No, I get the spotlight. It's a thing that we use in our interviews with people in the podcast to make sure that they tell all the truth.
Make sure that they're from Chinese Room.
Yeah.
Just shine the light.
Yeah. But that's one of the. So we've got like this three-point lighting, which I guess we use everyone. Then you got the fill light, right? That tries to soften the edge between these two lights.
So with the 3-point light, you've got one that's like the spots. So you've got a very bright one that will take like a main edge of the face or model, basically. So that'll be the main bit that you will look at, like the point of interest almost. And then you've got a fill light, which is just to fill basically the tone of the object. So you don't have a harsh transition between super bright and black. Right. And then so it'll just fill it. Very subtle. And then there's a sort of a technique that they use in film and games where you want the stuff to kind of pop out from the background. So if the character's very bright, you make the background darker, and vice versa. So if the character's darker, you make the background full of more volumetric or lighter. So that's the kind of last bit where you just sort of fill the background so that pops out a bit more. But then there's other ways where when I was talking about the fill light, where some films don't use a fill light at all. It'll be very harsh key light. But if you want to create like a more intense mood, and you won't have a fill light at all, and then you'll just push out the background. So it's like mostly they're in shade and they've just got a sort of harsh line on them. And then there's another technique where you can use like just which is what we did a lot in horror, where we did a lot of rim lighting, which it just gets the outline of objects and characters, and that's a technique that we would use to keep it scary, but also know where you're going, basically.
Right, because you then can show the outline of the monster or whatever it is.
Yeah, the outline of the monster, or even the outline of a corridor, or the outline of like a room, or like to kind of give that kind of, not like I'm grabbing the player's hand being like, there's your door. But it's allowing you to be like, oh, what's over there? And you can lead them like breadcrumbs almost.
And rather than having a spotlight on the door going like, look, door.
Door. You can be more subtle about it.
Right. This is used a lot in films, and recently I found a website that I'm slightly in love with. They're not sponsoring the podcast, but it's called shotdeck.com.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's Shot Deck. It's brilliant. I love it.
And that's got like a massive database of shots from films that you can use as reference and for lighting and for composition and things like that. But big shout out to that, which made me. You reminded me by talking about like, okay, so we need to have this, and you see this in films a hell of a lot. Like if you start thinking where the light would be, but that's film. That's when you can control the camera. But I don't know if any of the games that you worked on, I guess Mafia would be at Hangar 13 would be one of them, where basically the player can go anywhere, right? So. You can't go like, oh, I'm gonna have this lovely three lights set up, and the player just moves away from it, and you're like, God damn it, there was perfect lighting there. How do you manage that?
There's different techniques, but one of them I know is like you'll have like a light rig, which is basically that like a light will follow the character, like you'll have it off and it will light part of the character, and when the character moves, it will dynamically light the character as well. But then that's the kind of art of lighting as well. Like you have to hide this stuff as well. Like it, and sometimes you will see it. Like, you know, it's
that's very obvious in first person. Sorry, it's very obvious in first person games when you like, especially in dark rooms, when you approach the wall, everything just becomes like bright around you because it's gonna has this sort of like fakey light that's attached to the capsule, and it walks around with it just to like illuminate the area.
And sometimes you can't hide that, so you can try hard. This stuff happens sometimes, so you have to weigh up between, can the player see 90% of the time, or is it going to be that one part where, like, you know, then there's other things you can do too, where obviously the outside scenes are good because you can have like a big directional light, which will be, it's the sun, so it doesn't matter if you're seeing the sun, I will point to certain things, and you can create bounce light off that. And it's the same thing, like I was talking about how you push the character out from the background. You can do that in environments too, with the silhouettes and the darkness and the bright parts of a game as well. Like, so you can have certain bits that aren't as important in a slight shade, and then you can have the main part with a big, like, direct a big sunlight beam hitting it. So again, you have to use like real world, what you get in real life, to your kind of advantage as well.
But do you always have to be diegetically real? Like everything has to have like a real light bulb, or can you fake it a little bit? Like, you know, there should be there's a light on this door, but there isn't,
should be
like
some kind of source.
Yeah, so there will be, it's easier to start, even if you're making a fantasy game, even you're making a sci-fi game, people are used to seeing lights coming off a source to begin with. So you kind of build off the sources. So you either build off, like, so start with the big sources, like you'll start with like the directional light, or you'll start with a massive spotlight if it's a horror or a sci-fi sort of alien-esque horror, and then you build off that. So that becomes an easier way to light, in a sense. And you can fake, like you can, so as long as you've got your main source lights, you can then, like the older, I don't know, there's a bit behind that's not getting some light, you would use sort of fill bake lights, they're called. Like you would put them, they're ones that don't, so you can't see the source, and they don't have a very bright spot like in the world. They just fill, again, they fill around parts of the world. And that's how we would fake it, basically.
And in movies, there are people like behind, like with like bits of card, like reflecting light into the right places, so you can see that horrible clock, you know, that in the background.
Yeah, we do that. We still do that in games with like big emissive cards. Like you can still, like, you can make a, say you want in, I don't know, in some metal, like say you've got like a very shiny desk or something, so you really want like a bright specular like on it to make the metal stand out more. We would do a thing where we would cover like a sort of almost like a card or a box or something in the game in a very bright material. We would then hide the box from the player, but it would still show up like on the item. So we still do all these weird tricks like in games from film.
I guess it's worked for like what over 100 years or so of film. They figured it out. Well, you might as well steal it. I mean,
you even do it in paintings. Like I was reading a really cool thing on Twitter about light in paintings, and it's the exact same stuff with the like the diffuse light, the bounce light, the key light. They still paint it in. Like thousands of years have been doing this stuff.
You need a good lighting artist though to fake stuff even, right? Though, because I can imagine the room is, let's say it's dark and it has this bluish light, and suddenly you want to put something red, and then where's that red coming from? That you need either a source or you need somehow to blend it in, and that's why the lighting artist comes in and makes it look better. We can just take stuff and it looks like it has no source, because you need someone to know how the light works even to fake it, right?
Yep. You can, that's where the kind of like, again, the art comes from. Like you've got all this technical stuff as well. You've got the player's got to be able to see, it's got to look nice, but then, you know, you get art direction being like, I don't like the creepy looking clock in the background. I want this to be nicer. So yeah, that's where the art will come in. Like say you've got a light source that's over in the corner, but you still want the clock to be lit up. It's that balancing act, like you say, like you've got to balance it in so the player doesn't go, oh, they've shoved a spotlight over there, that kind of stuff.
This is one of the, it's one of those great, it's all like, you know, smoke and mirrors, and there's like the magic of making an environment real. I discovered a thing in Blender. Sorry to bring Blender into the situation, but that you can actually put negative light in a light. So like, you have like the intensity of the light, goes from 0 to whatever. But in Blender, you can actually put minus, and they'll start sucking light away.
Ooh.
From an area. So if you want to darken an area, you can actually put a light there and put like -3. But I still have to try that in. Yeah, well, I need to find out if like Unreal will do this. I'm going, ooh.
That's pretty cool.
I think again, it depends on what like pipeline you're using, because
right.
you can do all this strange stuff, and then if say you want to make a game where you do that kind of stuff, you then start to like make a lot of things to do with lighting comes from materials as well. So in fact, a heavy part of it is driven by like the albedo, the specular, the roughness, metallic kind of stuff. So you'd have to almost set up your materials to do stuff like that. So be friendly with your material artist if you're an artist.
Chuck him a fiver from time to time.
You mentioned pipelines. You did VR to start out with, and then you went and did stuff like Man of Medan. Did you notice anything, or did you find anything was more difficult going between the two different pipelines of working from a VR game to, I guess, I wouldn't class Man of Medan as like a standard third-person game, but it's different, right? You're not actually in the world, sort of thing.
Yeah, making a VR game is hard. It's so performance heavy. Like every polygon counts in that game, basically. Again, certain stuff was done is done for VR games where they will try and accommodate for the lighting, and they almost have to do certain things from scratch to accommodate specifically for that. I haven't looked like under the hood with Unreal and what they do with VR, but there are ways that you have to set up your projects for VR. Like for say you're making a VR game and things like that, you have to set off right from the start what you're going to be doing in order to save
from
that
from the
foundation upwards.
Because I tried to during a certain lockdown, I managed to get a from the marketplace of Unreal. You should go there. There's a sale on at some point. There's always a sale on. But they had like this like beach environment, and I went, oh, you know what? I could just see if I could make a very simple VR environment that I go to the beach, right? Because I can't go to the beach. Unlike the Brighton
beach is on fire.
Yeah. and the beach is on fire, and here comes my gun. But no, it was basically like you could see it worked really well in first person, but the illusion like immediately broke down the moment you put a headset. You looked at the ground, nothing was 3D. It's like the ground was super flat, which in 2D, I guess, without the VR helmet looked, hey, that totally sells it. Look, I can see little flowers and stuff. And then just in VR, just completely fell flat. So there's that's a heavy
scale as well. So there were items in Blood and Truth where you could literally pick them up and look them at in the face like this. But then that also required the fact that you had to have this balance between them being very high poly but also running properly. So there's a lot of baking going on, because you couldn't just have a low poly model like picking it up and looking at it like this. So it had to be high poly, had to bake it. It had all these rules. Like with most VR, most VR games will follow this. It's not just specifically for Blood and Truth. It's all this kind of stuff. Yeah, so it's a definitely different game from third person.
I think it's like what you're saying. A lot of it can end up being smoke and mirrors, because the player can see all this in much higher detail there in it, and like Mark said, it breaks the illusion. One of the painful things, I guess, possibly for a lighting artist, give someone a torch in a VR game, and it just undoes all your lighting work bit by bit.
We had this other thing too with so for those that don't, anti-aliasing was like jaggedness on lines in a screen, and you can usually get it on diagonal thin geometry. And it stops that from happening. It stops it from shaking and looking gross, basically, on the screen. When you're in VR, this can make you feel sick. Like we had this thing called like the hurl, the hurl level, like how much am I going to throw up, like with an asset? So we had to like look at assets basically and just check if it made you feel sick or not. Again, all VR games will have to do this, and we couldn't just have chain link fences because they were just a big no. They were just a
yeah, those are so bad in VR.
So bad.
And
it's
how
like
do you
a
get away
QA
with it?
testing thing, right? Like it's a QA testing phase. You have to test whether you will be sick or not of the objects, of everything. It's just like a thing in VR.
Yeah, they still do it even in normal, like just like sort of general games. Like they still check stuff for this, like railings, grills, chain link fencing. And then the way to either fix it is one, take it out or make it thicker. Like those are the kind of Stone Age ways of fixing this stuff.
I mean, taking it out.
I had a question. Sorry.
No, after you.
I was actually going to ask a question about Man of Medan and how much does the lighting influence the level design of that game, because I remember playing it and it's very the layout of the game is very specific because the camera movement is also very specific, and it shows you like either a ghost disappearing from behind a door, or it shows a head, a door that you can go through. So everything is it's like super scripted. That's what it feels like. So when that game is being built, and whoever works on the level design, how much do they kind of like rely on the lighting artist to come in and help them build the level? Were you part of that phase?
Sometimes it was a bit difficult because we had a thing where like it was quite film based as well, with this kind of, like you say, like something making you jump and kind of things like that. And there was also a game part. So there was a thing where the designers and the lighting artists did clash at sometimes, not like in a sort of like a big sort of fight going on in the car park, but like there was had to be a balance between them moving cameras and then lighting having to do the final sort of pass on them. And there were times with like any development where I'd come back from like a holiday or something, and then like the cameras had all moved without knowing, and it was a bit of a battle. But again, it was a balance between lighting having to be the final say, basically, like this is where they're going, and to stop this now, like even in mocap shoots, they will go from this like the start being, and they will decide where the characters are going to be on screen when they do the mocap for this stuff and for the lighting, and they will even light them sometimes like where the sun is going to be, like hitting the character in the mocap, because they know that once they go into the game, the lighters are going to have to sort of replicate that or do something similar. So again, right from the start, they'll try and do this kind of stuff. Not always. Again, like stuff doesn't always go right, but that's the way you kind of mitigate for this happening. Like you work out from the start where the character's going to be, what the kind of shots are going to be like. But then there were parts where it broke into like you being able to walk around the game like in the third person and this kind of stuff. But then we still did the cameras based on where the cameras were going to fling around the world. So yeah, everything was kind of done right down to the letter for lighting.
It's kind of ironic that we come from replicating cinema in game, and I'm sorry, Man of Medan, using that as an example because it's present in my mind at the moment. But we've kind of like now gone like a bit of a 180, and now we're using Unreal to light real people, right? So Mandalorian, for example, had like massive LED screens, and that was done in an Unreal. So like instead of having like the actor with a real light to make sure the sun's shown from the right direction, they put the whole background around them, so like all the reflections were real.
I find that really exciting. Like the nerd in me absolutely loves it. Like to be able to. So for those that haven't seen how they made Mandalorian, it's the fact that they, like you said, on film set, they'll have a green screen, and then some guy will be running around with a big spotlight and do all this kind of stuff, and to light the outfits, and they'll do a lot out in post, obviously as well. Like a heavy amount will be done in post. But now for like Mandalorian, they're using Unreal to light the sets, not even the characters. Like they will use like ambient light from an Unreal Engine level. To say you wanted a big desert scene, they'll put in a desert scene in Unreal, and they will project it onto it's LED, isn't it? It's like a LED, like a huge LED
80-foot screens or something like that, all
huge
around
screens. And then that actual light from that desert will light the stage, will light and it's really exciting. It's great. So you can change it on the fly. Like you can move a rock like in Unreal Engine, and they were using like proper data they had Mando standing on a platform, and then they had like half of his ship in one of the shots, but it was like the actual made prop that had a very shiny material on it, and it wasn't like post that was doing all that on it. It was the actual
reflection, right?
A real life reflection from the Unreal Engine scene. So it's brilliant. Yeah, so it's almost like they're almost both like coming together now. Like we nicked a load of stuff from film, now they're nicking a load of stuff.
Because for that show, when I first started seeing that show, I was like going, you made his suit of armor super shiny. Is this like you don't like your life or something? Because the poor like effect artists afterwards, I thought they were going to have to be like redoing the HDRIs, and it's just like a nightmare. But I went, oh, okay, no, you just threw money at it. Okay, yep, fine.
Even from like an actor's point of view, it must be so great to be able to see what you're actually acting to, rather than it being a green puppet. Like I think that just for immersion would be really cool.
Yeah, it's like imagine you're in a desert, and it's like no. Here, look, you can see
you are in the desert, and here is Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah. Fire. No, that screens. Do not break them, please.
Do you think with the this sort of cross-pollination between movies and games, do you think it ever goes too far? Do you think that games are lit too cinematically and too using kind of conventions or tropes or anything from movies? Do you think there's still room for that fantasy that you talk about?
There are points where games follow a kind of sort of like theme almost. So there was the Battlefield, the blue and orange scenario, and then there was the Gears of War grey, everything was grey and brown scenario kind of thing, and it feels like almost like at the moment with games it's this ultra realism like stuff, which I love. Like I love this stuff, but I almost get really excited when a game now does something a little different, like something's, again, everything uses the same sort of setup to begin with lighting, but just maybe something else a little bit different, just maybe a different sort of post process goes over, or some different color grading. That's exciting.
I think this is why Super Hot got really popular. It was like a very striking look. It had a very it was a 3D game. Actually, when you're in it, it's kind of fairly realistic. You can, I don't know if it's probably a Unity game, but it's doing a PBR workflow in there, but they've just chosen the colors to be those colors.
Sometimes, but then again, I like both. Like I really get excited where the sort of ray tracing tech's going, where all that kind of stuff is, and the moodiness of film. Like now so before in like they would only have like one lighter in games. They still do only really have one lighter, but it's moving towards now like I really would love it like teams of lighters kind of thing. And because it's getting to be like that with the way tech is going, and with Unreal and ray tracing and how much it's like needed now. So it's exciting where it's kind of going. But again, films do that. They follow a sort of set look for a certain year, and then the year after will follow a certain look. And I don't know, I can't remember for the life of me what it's called, but there's actually a word for it. Like it happens like in creative media, where even like subconsciously one project will be working on something and then another project will be working on it, and they both come out and they're both very similar, and it happens a lot.
The original word for that was actually, and this is ironically me saying it, it's actually meme. It was Richard Dawkins talking about the selfish meme, and these ideas that these same concepts were born into two completely different places, and there's this parallel evolution in which you find the same thing being solved at the same time, in two completely different places. And you do see this, as you say, in media a lot, and it's just because same influences. And this is where you need diversity in teams, people.
Yeah.
But
It could also be this thing where like you think you're doing a really unique idea, and then it both comes out like all 5 other studios in the UK and doing the exact same idea. You're like,
we've seen that a lot in games too. Maybe with not crazy mainstream games, but there have, because like you said, we have the same influences, and we can start working on similar things or themes or looks or anything. Something will always be similar to something else at one point.
Yeah,
and it's when they both come out at the same time, but it's a real
there can only
confluence.
be one.
There can only be one game.
There can only be one.
That's why games become so competitive, though, right? Because we're all, like you say, taking the same influence from everything. That's why genres pop up, and then people are like, oh, it's a clone of this, but slightly different. It's like,
even though they maybe start development at the same time.
Yeah,
but then it rolls back even further, doesn't it? It's like, because they could have taken a thing from a film, that took a thing from Ridley Scott, that took a thing from
I mean, in recent years, I think one of the games that really springs to mind, talking about lighting and using that, is Control. There is so much, like, and as you were saying, you know, like using the RTX technology of like having ray trace shadows and like reflections and all of that. I just love the idea that all of these games are dealing with like this physical thing of photons flying around, and you're still doing it. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because I was having to read some stuff in Unreal Engine to solve some weird problem, and suddenly I went down this wormhole of photons and how light behaves when it's traveling through different things. It's kind of like, well, am I doing a physics lesson? I want to do a pew pew game. What's going on?
Yeah. Again, it's like the real life film tech. It's like the real life lighting now. So we use, like, we're moving towards like real world values in games. So it's not just sort of arbitrary figures anymore. Like, it's actual like proper lux of a sun. It's now supporting real world physics. So not only do we get real world films, we get real world physics as well. Like,
it's exactly where my background of whacking in a skybox and clicking bake has just like, it's just gone off into the stratosphere. It's like, I didn't know what EV100 is now, and I tried typing in numbers that I think will make sense, and
but
just
now people
trash comes out.
Just people use the HDRI, same thing, right? You just whack in an HDRI, you're done, walk away, you know, explosion in the background.
Then you got to go down the rabbit hole of how was the HDR actually exposed, and then having to expose it properly, and then so this is when I was trying to learn this stuff. I went down this huge rabbit hole of just like, you Google one thing and it's like EV100, how do photons work, what's atmosphere, what's like why is the sky blue? I'm not kidding, that actually went down that rabbit hole.
And it's good that you kind of get taught this stuff. I had again, it was like in an Unreal, it was like, oh, here's a sky sphere. It's like, here's all the settings, and all of the settings are to do with like physics, like climate physics. And I'm like going, I don't know what value.
Just play around with them until something looks good, and then ship it. That's all we know, because if you're not a lighting artist, you're like, I don't know what this means. What is the sun intensity? Is it burning the whole place supposedly? Like, I don't know, right? Is it giving me sunburns?
Well, yes, the new sky atmosphere stuff uses the ground dust to actually affect, like, you can how the light scatters on the horizon, like all this kind of stuff. And so I was like, what are you up to? I'm like, don't worry, I'm just Googling how the Sahara Desert supports lighting, in real life.
Ellen, and like you worked on Mafia, so that is a little bit like, it kind of relates to what we're talking about. That is an open world game that has like a day and night, and it's like, it uses natural light, right? Whereas Man of Medan it's in a ship, and there's this artificial lamps or whatever. How is that? What are the main differences between a natural lit open world versus a linear confined like horror game?
It comes from again, with like open world, it depends where it's set. Like, is it set like Horizon Zero Dawn? Like, is it set mainly like outside? Again, they have cities, but a lot of it you're on a big plane, like running around. It comes down to tech, like the tech as well. Like, in terms of like, will it all, like, because you can't bake huge it's gonna have a sad time, like big
huge levels.
You're gonna go down like a again, you might not always, but you'd go down a dynamic pipeline where you wouldn't be baking anything, and a lot of your lighting would come from the sun, like it would come from the sun, and you would fake it like this. But even with big open world games, you still put in like you fake the bounce, like because again, that's another big problem with games, and I'm not sure it will be in the future, but at the moment, the fact that we can't, what you get from baking is you get some nice global illumination. You get like the skies reflecting in like all of the stuff. It just looks more put together, basically, and that's why you bake. It doesn't look so flat. But when you're doing a big dynamic game, that's expensive when you do that dynamically. That's why we bake. It's not as expensive to run frame rate wise. So that's, but when you have a big open world, you can't really do that. So, but you can't really get that nice global illumination. So there are ways of doing it. So you can do ray trace global illumination, which they do use in film, but at the moment in time, it's very, very expensive. So some game engines will make their own, like they'll make their own like code almost like to do this kind of stuff. And that's the biggest challenge at the moment with those big open world games. It's to try and get that kind of stuff, but cheaply. So it's not that they can't do it. It's more making a game. So you have to kind of balance it.
If it's going to be like a quarter or half your budget just to like get that light in there. And then on top of that, you got AI and shooting, it's going to be a mess.
So I'd say like right now, like here and to this down to the hour, we would fake it. A lot of it's still faked. Like we would use point lights with no shadow, like casting no shadow. And obviously if you had the global illumination, if you put the sun in, it would bounce that lovely, say it's like a nice golden sun, it would bounce that golden sun out to the world around it. So not just hit the world and there'd be a sort of sharp line across the world. It would then be absorbed by the material. It would dissipate everywhere in the world, but that's expensive to do dynamically. So to fake that, we would get point lights, because cast shadow is very expensive. So we'd turn that off and we'd almost like put it along the sunlight, like put it along the directional light, just faking where you'd think it would look. So it's a bit of like, you'd have to get a load of refs up and see how it would work in real life kind of thing.
You said dynamically, that means someone had to code it. Is that something you're also responsible for? Or
so that's where I won't do that kind of stuff. I will know roughly how it works, but I somewhere I have to draw the line. I have to sleep at night, like that's a point where I'd stop. So there's a lot of faking again going on with those type of games. And
can you influence, I guess, if you say you want to use the technique of having like all the point lights in a line or whatever, I don't know how to you create that fakeness. Is that something you can come up with, a technique to create lighting, and then you go talk to the coders and like, hey, we need this support? Or is that mainly already there and you just use the existing tools?
So if we're talking about just Unreal Engine at the moment, that is how I would kind of do it to begin with. Again, because the tech is developing, and again, but until there are new versions of Unreal and before things do get to that point, you have to kind of you do have to fake it still. Like we're almost waiting for the next generation of stuff almost, so that we can use what they use in film with the ray tracing, and we can use a game with it. Because even now when you use ray tracing, you have to do so much behind the scenes to even make that have a nice frame rate. There's a reason why Control's set in a big brutalist level. It's all and one
it still
material.
Didn't run on PS4
yep, and it's still hard to run. Like so it's like, yes, you can get coders to do certain things, but it's still a bit of a waiting game of an overall generation of stuff, basically. So until then, you still have to use old techniques to try to supplement the new tech, basically.
What references will you give? Like, if I'm going to say as junior lighting artist rather than like an idiot like myself, but or maybe an idiot like myself, like good references for them to say like, hey, check out like the lighting in this game, or like check out the lighting in this movie. Or I mean, obviously, I think a wide variety, but what are your go-to check this out kind of references and why.
If we're going from like juniors wanting to move into lighting, I would say yes, games are great for lighting, but a lot of games take influence from film. So I would say before you go looking at games, look at films, look at the old like LA Noire stuff, look at the old like the big huge landscapes, vistas of even like westerns, like this
John
kind
Ford
of stuff,
right?
All of this kind of stuff. Get a wide range of media and look at it. Don't just look at like a certain set thing. Even if you don't really like these films, just look at how they've kind of done them, kind of thing. And again, not that we sponsor Shop Deck, but you can literally type in desert into Shop Deck and it will come up with hundreds of shots that very famous films have used to light certain scenes, basically. And then again, it's to do with, there's a psychological part to this as well. There's like what kind of colors bring emotion to people. So yellow
I wanted to ask you about this.
Yeah, so yellow is madness, red is rage, blue is like sort of sadness. Not always, but they are used heavily throughout film or subtly, that kind of thing. And even other things like things like Schindler's List, where the only color in the whole film is a girl in a red coat, basically. They use these techniques throughout film to make human beings feel things. So that there's a psychology behind it as well, kind of thing.
Does photography help with learning about light?
Yes, definitely. I love photography. That's something I do still as just a hobby. Even with like my phone, I love going out and just taking shots. Annoying all my friends basically because I've run off somewhere. Like, where's she gone? Like,
I do that not with light, but when I walk over something and I see like something broken down or like moss coming out of the wall, oh, look at the nice texture. Oh, take a picture. I won't do anything with it. I just like it because it's like, oh, it's so cool. I don't know.
Yeah, the real world.
So weird.
Yeah, cut to 10 years later when you're like, look at my reference. Finally, the reference of that broken moss.
I have to like, I just have like a folder of like, it's called barriers. So that has like things that I've taken pictures of that make no sense, like of the wall, of the ground, just something I found, some piece of junk that makes no sense. Just, ooh, look, reference for games.
I love it. That does bring me back to like the real world referencing. There's nothing better than looking at things. Like, I wanted a bit of a break from the computer the other day, so I went for a walk down the seafront, and I just couldn't turn my head off. I kept looking at the sea, and then like this low-lying fog that was kind of mist was going over the sea. And I'm like, I can't. Like, I just want a break, like, from this stuff.
I'm sorry, you beautiful real life lighting. Can you stop that?
Can you just stop being subtle and lovely?
Know. Oh,
It's
look at
like
this nice
that.
reflection of the sea, and you can't keep seeing stuff like that. You can't turn your brain off.
I remember seeing some story about some a dad who found his child crying, and she was quite young. She was at school, and he asked her why she was crying, and she said because she just learned to read, and now she had to read everything.
Yeah, that's a
But
good one.
now, as soon as you can read, you just can't stop. You have to read everything that's put in front of you.
Consume everything.
Yeah.
Oh, she was feeling
Poor
tired.
Ellen.
It's like that.
She was the
CPU
lighting artist.
cycle.
She's like,
Yeah.
I've got to look at everything.
Can't stop looking at light.
Can't look at everything. No, I've done it. B&Q just gives me PTSD, the lighting section. I can't look at them. Just get rid of them. I know all their lumens.
Oh no. But okay, so like simplify. So like, rather than trying to get into the industry, it's like if people are trying to start doing a bit of lighting, what would be like, do this or try not to do this in a big, like, if I said over a pint, which I wish we could record this over a pint, saying like, all right, what should I do and what should I look out for not to do in general lighting in games?
Something. So this big thing, even with like just sort of even drawing or concept art, where like people go, oh no, I did this without a ref. No ref. It's like, no, use a ref. It will help you so much, basically, in terms of being a better lighter, being a better drawer, being anything. If there's something you want to feel like, just Google it. Just, again, don't be afraid to Google a shot that you really like, that you think the lighting looks really lovely, and just try and copy it, literally. Like, if it's got a sun in the shot, start with the sun, like position the sun to be like a sunset, and then just do a little bit of post. Just try and match it. Even if you fail massively, you've started to look at the referencing and begin that process, and that would be what I would say to start as. And again, weirdly, less is sometimes, not always, not with like when certain things, but for games, less is more. So start with as little lights as possible, get the main one and build off it. And if you can match that reference with 4 lights, you've nailed it. Like, just
okay, 4 lights, Valentina, only 4 lights in the whole thing.
4 directional lights, like 4 suns.
Yeah, right, all of it.
It's something actually in Unreal that that's been. I was working on my laptop until recently, and it's been killing me. All this point lights, all this spotlight, everything, just if it's not baked and I delete them, it just takes all my frame rate. Now that I'm working on a good PC, I don't even care how many lights you've got. But like, actually, if you want to make a playable game, that light you need to figure out how to make that light work, right? And that's gotta be so difficult.
Yeah, that's why I think it comes down to the fact that find a big spotlight, get the main one in there. What's the one thing the player's going to look at first, and then just sort of almost like detail off it, basically. And it just makes lighting so much easier. It's one of the best things I ever kind of learned in terms of lighting. It stops you becoming massively overwhelmed as well, because that is the main thing that they're going to look at. Find something, even if it's like a big desk lamp. What's the main thing that someone's going to look at when they enter a room or be outside, or that kind of stuff.
Ellen says this with a massive desk lamp right behind her.
There it is.
And
the darkness.
On the dark on the other side. Yeah, look at that.
Hey, yeah, that's an amazing shot. Like the dark and the light. It's like very scripted.
I'm not actually talking. It's that lamp that's talking. It's like whispering.
What a reveal! Oh my God!
Oh God.
Well, Ellen, I have to say it's been enlightening talking to you in this episode. Thank you so much for coming on board.
That's great. Thanks for having me.
And hopefully we can bring you back and maybe get somebody else from the Chinese room, because why the hell not? I mean, we're working our way through the staff. So
let's get someone from audio, we'll offset this a little bit.
Yeah. This has been very illuminating. Jonathan, it's your turn.
Yeah.
We'll have to say pun. Come on.
I refuse. I'm not doing it.
Okay, well, I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, puns aside,
super enlightening.
Yeah. It's been amazing to have you on board. Thank you very much. If you have, dear audience, if you have any questions, please tweet us or email us. We'll put links in the show notes, and I'm pointing down below because that's what you're meant to do. I don't know, subscribe, like, I don't know, do what you want to do.
Smash that like button.
Smash that like button. And
don't smash your keyboard.
No. Just your monitor. And on that note, thank you very much and good night. Bye.
Bye.
The Level Design Podcast has been a Command Studio production. Our editor is Matthew Lever, and this episode has been produced by Bridie Rowe.